We are back. Welcome to the Joe Holka Show, presented by Line Movement. We have a very special segment on tap today, so let's not waste any time. We got to get my man Mike Tagliere in here. He is the lead NFL writer and analyst for FantasyPros.com. One of my absolute favorite people to talk about and talk football with overall. Mike, how's it going, man? Welcome to the Joe Holka Show. This is one of the first times we've talked on my show and not on your show, so it's a little bit of a different dynamic when I'm going to have to be the host. We'll see how that goes, but how are you, man?
I'm stoked, man. Anytime I get to sit down and talk with you is a good time. It's funny how our styles, I don't want to say clash, but they work together, right? Like I'm more diving into the past stats and like the film grinding and all that stuff, putting it together, and you're like pure numbers and you're looking for certain things. And there's things I've learned from you on a DFS standpoint, made me a better player. So I always look forward to talking to you, man.
Yeah, we balance each other out really well, I would say. So it's gonna be a quick segment. We're gonna be efficient, and that's the important thing. But if you're listening to this on the podcast later and you can't seem to find that video version on my channel where all my other ones for the Joe Holka Show are, that's probably because this video is going to be exclusively on the Line Movement YouTube channel every week. So check it out, youtube.com/Line Movement. Lots of great content over there in general, not just NFL related, though we do have a bunch of NFL shows over there as well. Today, Mike, I mentioned it, but we're going to do our best to get everyone at home just a quick flyby at each position, the absolute best plays, the must starts, all that good stuff. So we're going to do our best to talk through an expensive player, a cheap player, if you're purely someone that's here watching, focusing on DFS only. But also, I'd imagine Tags is going to drop a little bit of knowledge on us today. So that's going to help out a little bit with your start-sit decisions as well. Mike, let's get into it. Who are you looking at quarterback this week?
I mean, quarterback, I'm probably going to save some money. If I want to play value-wise, I'm going to go to Tyrod Taylor. You're looking against a guy against the Bengals who were torn apart by mobile quarterbacks last year. They have a lot of, I think they're going to be starting 3 new linebackers this year. They've got a lot of new pieces. DJ Reader up the middle should help them stop the run a little bit more, but that's more running backs. Tyrod Taylor is going to scramble. He only has, when you look at the receiving options he has there with no Mike Williams, he's going to buy time if he doesn't get the ball out of his hand to Austin Eckler or Keenan Allen relatively quick. So I would anticipate him rushing for at least 50 yards in this game, providing you with a decent floor in DFS, and obviously if he throws a touchdown or two, you're not gonna pass on that. But it just allows you to do some other things in your lineup because there's not, despite DraftKings coming out with their pricing, like 3 weeks ago for this slate, I feel like there's just no crazy values at every position that I feel great about. So I just want to play it safe at quarterback, save some money there. If you want to spend up, obviously you're going to go to Lamar Jackson, but at 8,100, they've made it extremely tough to fit him in your lineup if you want to play someone like George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, no matter what. So
you said it, man. Lamar Jackson, in a perfect world, sure, get him in your lineup. It's just really tough to do. So I've been kind of trying to piece my way through some of these cheaper options. Tyrod's a guy that I love as well, but I can't let you get out of here when we're talking about quarterbacks without talking about your boy Mitch Trubisky. He's one of these cheaper guys that I've heard some people talk about, some smart people talk about. I'm kind of trying to, I think I'm with you on Tyrod as being the best option down there. People talking about Minshew, Teddy, Mitchell Trubisky. You have any preference on either of those guys?
If you're playing in a tournament, Trubisky makes a ton of sense. He's an easy player to stack. You look at this Detroit defense, and so every time that Trubisky has played against this Matt Patricia defense with Matt Nagy as his head coach, he's thrown for at least 3 touchdowns. The last game against them was over 300 passing yards, 3 touchdowns. You go to the first meeting, he rushed for a touchdown as well. Now they moved on. They traded away Darius Slay. And so Jeff Okudah, is he going to start? Is he not going to start? We've heard both sides of the thing. I want to say that he wasn't listed as a starter on their depth chart that they came out with. So even if Jeff Okudah, their number 3 overall pick, does start, it's his first NFL game with no NFL action against Allen friggin' Robinson. Anthony Miller has had the 2 biggest games of his career against the Detroit Lions. Go back to last year. It was his biggest game of the year last year. He has looked like a different guy in training camp is what they've said. So Trubisky, Tariq Cohen, he's another guy who can catch passes out of the backfield. If David Montgomery isn't 100%, they're going to have to lean on Trubisky a little bit more. So this is a week where I do believe it's easy to stack him in a tournament, and no one wants to play him because it's the cool thing to hate Mitch Trubisky. But in reality, even in season-long leagues this week, I think you can stream him and walk away with a minimum of 15 fantasy points.
Yeah, Trubisky's always one that I think is at least interesting because he gives you hopefully a little bit more of a rushing floor. We didn't see it as much last year, but it'd be nice if we could see him get back to that. How many times did we see 2 years ago now where it was just the Trubisky stacks that won all the money on DraftKings? So we could see that happen again. But I don't know. I think quarterback is the one where we're not too much worried about ownership overall. It's so flat. So let's move on to running back. I know we got to be efficient here. I'm gonna say that every single week. We're gonna be efficient. So I guess we'll give people permission to play Christian McCaffrey and move on. He's 10K. You can make it work. He's a fantastic play. Tags, if you're moving down a little bit, I have to get your Josh Jacobs take. I know it's kind of the chalk, the early week chalk. I would imagine just in this matchup overall, a lot of people will be all over Josh Jacobs. Are you one of them?
Yeah, he's my play of the week. He's probably going to be, I know they say don't overexpose yourself to certain running backs. I'm going to have at least 50% ownership in Josh Jacobs with the way he's priced. The Panthers last year allowed 18% more rushing yards than any other team in the NFL. 18 freaking percent. And now, granted, they had a lot of turnover. They lost Luke Kuechly. They lost some actual stars in their defense. This defense rebuilt so much that they went with an all-defense draft. That almost never happens in today's NFL. The Panthers have a new coaching staff, both offensive and defensive side. With these rookies coming in, they're going to be asking a couple of rookies to start. I don't really care how talented you are. If you're playing without preseason games in a new offseason where you haven't had a chance to learn that defensive scheme, offenses know exactly where they're going with the ball. They design these game plans. They've been under Gruden, and Greg Olsen for a couple of years now. They know exactly what's happening. In this Panthers team, there's just so much awry here. I don't see any way they hang in this game. So I do think that Josh Jacobs, no matter if he's involved in the passing game or not, this is a game where he should score 2 touchdowns. And then if he is involved in the passing game, which when they released Theo Riddick, when they traded away Lynn Bowden, I think it really did open up the things. And I bumped him up my projections to, I think, 52 targets on the year. So if you're getting 4 targets for him, that's perfectly fine, combined with the rushing upside that he has. At 6,800, he's kind of a no-brainer this week.
Yeah, I guess the price is what gets there for me, right? He's 6,800 on DraftKings, like you said. He's pretty expensive on FanDuel overall, 8,200 over there. So I think it's a site where he makes more sense because obviously he's not going to have as much of a pass catching role as some of these other guys we talk about. Do you think that's something that could improve with Jacobs this year? Like, I'm trying to talk myself into him on DraftKings right now. It makes me really uncomfortable, if I'm being honest.
I was against it. I was actually someone that was fighting against Josh Jacobs about 2 months ago because I said, everybody's talking about the pass game increase and like how we want to get him the ball more. And I'm like, so what? You want to get him the ball. What does that mean? All you've done this offseason is bring in more and more and more offensive weapons. Well, as time goes on, we're starting to see things fall off. Like Tyrell Williams, the only veteran they had in that wide receiving depth chart that had any semblance of experience in the NFL. We like Henry Ruggs fine, but he's not a guy that's going to get 8 to 10 targets per game. Bryan Edwards was not even going to start the season. All of a sudden, he's thrusted into the starting lineup. Hunter Renfrow is the definition of just a guy. Darren Waller is going to get some targets, but then again, with Lynn Bowden coming off the team, with Theo Riddick getting cut, we have Jalen Richard there, but I have bumped him up in my projections, and he wound up moving up to my RB8 on the season. So I did come around to Josh Jacobs. I'm still worried a little bit about this offense, what they present as a true upside. I don't know if Josh Jacobs has number 1 running back upside because they just don't score enough points, but there is enough volume here, especially in a matchup like this against Carolina, where he's going to be, I would say he's a lock for top 6 production this week and a chance at number 1.
It's just a scary fade, right? Like, he's the guy that you overthink because you think he doesn't catch passes, and then he falls in the end zone twice, and you're sitting there and everyone has him and you don't. So I probably will get there. I'm with you on pretty much everything you said with that. So if we were, not really my style, but if we were to kind of look down the salary spectrum a little bit, there's one guy that stands out. You mentioned the pricing earlier. Normally, week 1 rolls around, we have a couple just layups that are super cheap because the pricing is out so early. DraftKings did a little bit better job this year on, I guess, pricing up some of these backups. So tell me what your thoughts are on Antonio Gibson at 4K.
Gibson, so the reason that I'm probably going to include Gibson in my cash lineup is because of this. I am worried about him. I don't think that he should be considered cash game viable, but everyone's going to play him because you're getting him for 4K, and they want to fit Kittle. They want to fit CMC. They want to fit, maybe even going back to Lamar Jackson, whoever they want to play. If you want to fit a stud in there, you have to find some cheaper options. And there's really nobody at wide receiver under 4,900 that I can find as a value on DraftKings. So it's going to happen at the running back position. So here's my thoughts on this. I'm not in love with Gibson, but if you play him, the ownership's going to be high enough. If he busts, it's not going to hurt you that much. If you don't play him and he does go off, that value that people got on him, you are in big trouble in cash game lineups. So that's why I'm probably going to play Antonio Gibson over someone like James Robinson. The Jaguars, they're not going to be in scoring position very often. So even though he is the primary 1-2 down back, he can be mixed in on passing downs. I think there's a clear avenue for him to get 15 touches in this game, which at 4K, you definitely have to consider it. I'm going to take a look at the ownership projections as we get closer and closer to these games because between Robinson and Gibson, I feel similarly about them. I think it's possible that Gibson sees 7 touches and we're left saying, why did we overthink this? Why did we keep saying that that Washington was going to have a stud running back? It's Washington, guys. It's still Washington. So I mean, those guys are fine, and you probably have to go there in cash. But one player I would consider he's not necessarily cheap is Todd Gurley. Mm-hmm. Todd Gurley had in 5 career games against the Seahawks, he scored 11 touchdowns. And this Falcons team is obviously high-powered. They're going to score points. They're going to put points on the board. This is one of those games I probably want to attack in DFS, especially in tournaments. And Todd Gurley has multiple touchdown upside. They want to get him at least 15 touches, up to 25 if he can handle it. And knowing that we're in week 1 where he's as fresh as he's ever going to be, it's like I can see him getting touches here in Seattle. They've just basically invested in the back half of their defense and said, hey, we're going to hope to slow him down there because their front 7 is trash. It's legit awful. So Todd Gurley, if you don't like him, that's fine, but at 6,100 he's value.
Yeah, I'm trying to get past my biases with the Todd Gurley play and actually think through it kind of the way you just did, that if he ends up getting anywhere near 20 touches in this game, he ends up being a pretty screaming value. The Gibson one, I totally understand it in cash games. I think he makes a fantastic fade in tournaments just because you're going to end up on a different type of roster construction overall if you make it to one of those guys. But if you're playing someone like Antonio Gibson, it allows you to pay up a little bit at wide receiver. So talk about your boy Davante Adams and why he has to be in a lot of lineups this week.
I don't know how you don't include him. Like, this is like him and Josh Jacobs are the 2 guys that I'm kind of drawn to this week. And people are talking about Michael Thomas. I love Michael Thomas, but the disparity in the pricing here is just too much. I mean, you're going from 9,000 down to 7,300. If we're being real, Davante Adams should be around 8,500, 82 minimum this week. The Vikings have 3 new starting cornerbacks. Mike Hughes is going to be out there. Holton Hill's going to be out there, former sixth round pick, I think, or maybe even went undrafted. And then they have 2 rookies that they're going to move around there. We just found out that their top pass rusher, Danielle Hunter, is not going to be playing in this game. They signed their number 1 pass rusher behind him just a week ago when they traded for Yannick Ngakoue. So this Vikings defense has gone through a lot of changes that I don't think people realize. They were also a team that were kind of wrecked by wide receivers last year. So Aaron Rodgers going into this game, no clear-cut number 2 option. People talked about Jay Sternberger potentially earning a bigger role. He's number 3 on the depth chart right now. He's not getting any targets. Ellen Lazard is fine, but he's not going to – I mean, if you go back over the last, I think, 3 years now, Davante Adams has averaged, I think it's been 11 targets per game. It's 7,300. That's just auto-click for me.
It's crazy. I would say that if you really wanted to try and get different in tournaments, maybe someone like Chris Godwin in the same range, but I don't know. 7,300 for Davante Adams in this spot seems like the pretty clear top option if you are paying up at wide receiver. I know you have a couple guys you wanted to talk about that were a little bit cheaper. The one that I'm still waiting on, I guess, is Justin Watson. If he ends up being 3,800 on DraftKings, he's the type of player that I like to kind of save salary with. If Mike Evans sits and Watson ends up being kind of that direct backup, is he someone that would be like kind of on the top of your board for value, or do you like some of these other guys a little bit better that you mentioned?
No, I mean, if Evans sits, sure, we're going to see Watson on the field.
Yeah, is Scotty Miller going to end up being like rotating through on those ones then?
I think it would actually change the game plan entirely, and okay. I think that's why they have to make a decision really quick on whether or not Evans is going to play, because the way you see it, Chris Godwin can play on the perimeter and in the slot. Miller is not really that guy. I think Miller's more of a slot guy. Watson is a perimeter guy, and Watson's like the worst. He's in the worst situation here because there's no chance he gets in the slot because you have Scotty Miller, you have Chris Godwin. The perimeter cornerbacks there are fantastic. One of the best duos in the league between Marshawn Lattimore and Janoris Jenkins. It was always, Marshawn Lattimore is going to shadow this guy. We want the other guy. And that's why Chris Godwin went off last year against this team, because Eli Apple was just terrible. Mm-hmm. But now Eli Apple's gone. They basically stole Janoris Jenkins. He was cut from the Giants for off-the-field stuff, and he made some insensitive tweets. But they picked him up, and kudos to the Saints. I mean, they also picked up Malcolm Jenkins on the back end of that defense. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson is going to come down and probably play the slot a little bit more this year. That team is set up for a Super Bowl run. They're so damn good, and I think the Saints win that game. I think they play keep away. I don't think I would really attack that game. Even Justin Watson, I think I'd rather spend another $1,000 to get up to Deshaun Jackson and just play him. Like Deshaun Jackson, 4,900. He's getting probably 8 targets in this game against a weak defense. You know, they replaced Josh Norman with the aging Ronald Darby, who basically the Eagles said, we're done with you. They know exactly what Ronald Darby can and cannot do because he was on their team last year. As I mentioned, Anthony Miller at 5K, he's someone that has dominated the Lions in his career. He's had a great offseason. He's healthy. He's played with Trubisky in the past. This is his offense. You know, Taylor Gabriel's gone. And when Gabriel was out of the lineup last year, Anthony Miller was a different player. So I definitely like that group of wide receivers. I don't think I can get down to 3,800 for someone like Watson, especially in cash lineups. I just want the targets that I'm locked into. And Tom Brady is really a guy that he just goes on trust. And you look at someone like N'Keal Harry last year, even when he got into the lineup, people wanted to play him in DFS. And then it was like 3-4 targets. And it was like, I'm just going to pass on guys like that. But the last one, tell me that I'm not crazy for thinking about playing Jamison Crowder in cash at 5,200 against the Bills.
Well, I mean, you kind of took away my perfect transition, because I was just going to ask you if I should spend $1,000 more on Deshaun Jackson. So clearly we're on the same page with a lot of that stuff. I do prefer Deshaun Jackson to Jamison Crowder, even in cash. I think where things are at in the way that DFS is right now, you still need to get a little bit of upside into your lineup. I hate playing a guy like Deshaun Jackson when he's going to be like 25% owned, but I think that if he ends up catching that bomb and you've got Jamison Crowder instead, you're going to be in some trouble. So we did our best to get through all of these very quickly. So let's touch on tight end quickly as well. Mark Andrews at the top. I know that Kittle is up there as well. He's really expensive. I want to take a little bit more time today to talk about the difference between a guy like Chris Herndon, Hayden Hurst at the lower end of things. Is there anyone else that you like that's a little bit cheaper at tight end?
Jack Doyle, Trey Burton's on IR right now. We have Paris Campbell obviously out there. That's fine. But the Jacksonville Jaguars are a team that really struggled with tight ends last year. You wouldn't have known it if you looked at Doyle's stat line against them, but he was battling through injuries. He did have competition. The quarterback play wasn't great, but Phillip Rivers has traditionally targeted guys over the middle of the field. And the Jags' best corner, arguably coming into week one, is Trey Herndon, who's going to be covering the slot, which means Paris Campbell will cover him. So Doyle, I would say, is probably locked into 6 targets in this game. And at 3,600, it's really difficult to find that. Herndon should get peppered with some targets too, but the Bills have been one of the top teams against tight ends for quite a while. Nothing really changed in the back end of that defense. So I'm not excited about him. He should have targets, but that's more like season-long stuff. I think Andrews is a great tournament play, because people are either going to go up to Kittle or they're going to come down to Ertz. Ertz is a fantastic play too if you can't get to Kittle. But in tournaments, I think people are going to go one or the other. And Andrews is kind of stuck in that middle ground. And I don't think people realize the increase that Mark Andrews is going to have in snaps this year, which could lead to true breakout potential.
At defense, at the very top, I think Philly at 3,600 is really interesting. If you can get there, one of the best interior D lines in the NFL versus Washington offensive line that's just not good. I think Indy in the middle of that at 3K is probably going to be the chalk for probably good reason. But if we wanted to go super cheap, I think Green Bay at 2,600, maybe a top 3 D line in the league against Minnesota, who I would imagine still is pretty below average in terms of their offensive line. Mike, anything else before we get out of here at defense that caught your eye?
I mean, give me the free square with the Dolphins. I'll take the Dolphins.
Nice.
D against the Patriots. Cam Newton under center is different than Tom Brady. Newton he's prone to turnovers. It can happen. The Dolphins defense have a lot of ex-Patriots on that team. They know exactly how that team is run. The Patriots just aren't the same team at all. They lost their right tackle. He opted out for the season. So I don't think this is going to be a well-run machine in New England. And they even said that Jarrett Stidham wasn't playing well, but Cam Newton wasn't really pulling away with the job. They kind of gave it to him by default. So I am worried about that team. For 2,000, it allows you to do some crazy stuff with your lineups.
Mike Tagliere, everyone, you can find him on Twitter. He's at Mike Tagliere NFL and at fantasypros.com. You can find all of his articles over there, all of his work in general. So if you are on YouTube, smash that like button. Let us know in the comments what you think of our week 1 picks. If you're on Apple Podcasts, do me that favor and toss us a rating and review. Would really appreciate it. Be sure and check out all of our NFL content at linemovement.com. Mike and I will see you guys in 2 weeks. Next week we have TJ Hernandez from 4for4 in this segment. I'll talk to you guys later.